So today we're going to tackle a sliced apple, and I've deliberately let it go a little bit brown. So because it's much more interesting to draw an apple that's going a bit brown. So we've got two halves, obviously. We've got the reddish, shiny, ultra waxed half, and then the aging half. I could have done it like this, but I think it's quite interesting to have that comparison. Um, and how do we get the shine? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a multitude of colouring pencils. Now, how do I choose the colours? Difficult question to answer in a way, but obviously you look at what you've got visible to the eye to determine the colours you need, but you sort of add a few more in as well. So obviously we've got yellow, we've got brown, we've got a bit of pink, and as it ages, we're going to need even more browns and ochres. And then for the front, we've got the skin, we've got reds and oranges and pinks and yellow and brown. But what I like to do is add in a couple of reds, a couple of browns, a couple of greens, a couple of oranges, so that we've got a good variety. And then I also like to add in one very cold colour, which is lilac, and one warm colour. This one is a Conte Sanguine, which is like a sort of sienna, really. It's a really nice colour. And these Contes are really nice. You have to keep them quite sharp, and this one needs sharpening, but they're a lot softer than your average colouring pencil. A bit more like the consistency of a bit of wax mixed with chalk, I suppose. They're quite soft. Anyway, so to begin our picture, put all these to one side. We're going to do an initial drawing of the still life, which is here. Okay, so I've chosen my composition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do a line across the top here, like that. And then, so that cuts off that serrated edge there. And then I'm going to have the plate coming off. So it's a bit more interesting like this. And then off, can't even see the edge of it there. So I'm going to have the art there, and then I'm going to have the inner detail of the plate, like that, and that. And then I'm doing it very roughly to begin with, very roughly. Just getting a sort of general feel for the shapes, like that. And then that one is edging it like this. So to begin with, that's sort of pretty much all I need. And then that circle comes through here. So that arc comes down like that, that, like that, like that. So that's my beginning of that. I've also got a really nice shadow here, which I'm going to sort of rough in like that. And then there's a shadow coming over here like that. So that's my beginning, just a very simple beginning of colouring, putting the colouring pencil in. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an undercoat on the apples. So the undercoat is going to be yellow. So I'm going to add in a yellow base for my apple. This is sort of so it gets a bit of a zing coming through. Do it quite loose. It's just a sort of base undercoat. It can be quite rough because it adds extra texture, so that's quite useful. Very rough like that. Bit stronger on this side. And then on this side, I'm going to rub some of that back a little bit. Don't want quite so much of that pink coming through. Rub that back a bit. And then I'm going to do, in fact, for this one, I'm just going to do it very light. Very, very light. That's the undercoat. Very, very light on this one. Like that. And then I'm going to start to use a little bit of the grey. I've got a little bit of grey here, which is going to be for the shadow. But there's a sort of blue undercoat to this. So I'm going to put in a blue. Oops, blue, sorry. Blue rug. Some blue into this shadow. So what I'm doing is I'm blocking in colour. I'm blocking in colour as an undercoat. That's what I'm doing, blocking it in. It's an undercoat for the other layers. And you can be quite bold. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from light to dark because it's easier, because it's hard to put light colours over dark colours. Um, I'm going to put some little bit of this blue into the plate as well. Just a little bit of an undercoat on the plate. And then in the yellow, there's a bit of blue in here for the shadow, like that. It's a little bit stronger on the top there. That can go a bit darker. And then there's a bit of blue in here. But there's also a bit of red in there. And the reason being is because it's connecting with the yellow behind it. So I'm going to put a bit of red in there as well. A little bit of red, like that, and a bit in here. And then for the undercoat of the yellow, I'm going to put in some orange all over. And you can go over the shadow a bit as well, that's fine. So I suppose you could argue that this is going to be more of an impressionist feel of this still life, which is fine. You don't have to make a decision straight away. You can just think about it as it happens. Is it going to be, how is it going to evolve? Okay, so that's my beginning. Now I've got the orange, I'm going to carry on into the apple. And I'm going to add in a sort of layer of orange, still quite loose, lots of flexibility in the wrist. I'm just going, this is still another layer really of undercoat. So a couple of layers of undercoat before, you don't want any detail yet. There's a lot going on in this apple skin, a lot. And here we've got a sort of, got something going on around the edge, which is the tiny bit of visible skin, which we'll put in. Sometimes it's quite nice to put something in to sort of confirm things. And then I can see some green in this. I can see some green, but I'm going to put in a very gentle layer of green in this. Very, very gentle. Still very flexible with the wrist. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Very, very gentle. Just a sort of whisper of colour. And while I've got the green, I can add a little bit of green into here as well. Don't be afraid to use lots of colours, lots and lots of colours. Don't be afraid to use lots of colours. And I'm going to put a bit of green into that shadow too. And a bit into here, although this one feels a little bit more lilac. I can see some sort of violet or, yeah, like I can see some sort of violet in there. Is it violet? No, it's more of a, yeah, it's a violet. Now, violet is more of a blue purple, and purple is more of a red purple. I'm just putting a bit of violet in there. Now you've got some of the undercoat colours, you can start to think about adding the layering of the sort of normal colours, if you like. So I'm going to now put on some, let me find a sort of ochre. If I can. So I'm going to go into the the skin of the apple first. I'm going to put some ochres in here, wherever you can see a bit of browny, light browny colour. It's particularly more gathered down by the dimple at the bottom. There's a bit of up there. It's sort of thinking back to front, really. It's sort of thinking about what is underneath all of that. How is that skin colour made up? And then I'm going to go in with my, oops, my oranges. Quite a lot of orange in here. And you could put more in at the bottom. Still very loose, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So wherever you can see a sort of definite red is where you're going to put the oranges, because obviously that's going to be underneath that red colour. And still, as I say, quite loose. Tiny bit of orange at the bottom. And then I'm going to start putting in some reds. I've got a couple of reds. I'm going to put in some reds now. Ooh. Now this is a much cheaper pencil and it's quite useful because it's very sharp and hard, which means it does very sort of quite light, scratchy quality. So this will be good for detail later. Again, I'm not doing any sort of like apparent apple skin texture. I'm just still building up layers, really. Not the undercoat, but it's the layers that I'm doing now. There's obviously a bit more down the bottom. And notice how I'm sort of keeping it in the direction of how the apple is formed. I'm not doing it that way, I'm doing it this way. And the key is not to flatten it too much here. So if you put too much colour down strong here, it's going to flatten the whole shape. You need to keep the sense of the light at the front. And so we're just building up gradually. There's a sort of a bit in here. It takes a long time with colouring pencils. It's a lot of work, but it really is, it is worth it. Okay, is there any red in here? Arguably. Not really, actually. I can't really see any. Maybe a tiny bit at the bottom there. Not much, though. Makes you realise how brave the Impressionists were and the Fauvists for the colours that they saw. And I'm going to go in with some pink. Now, this pink is a cheap pencil and it breaks all the time. Give it a quick sharpen. But don't disregard cheap pencils because they can be quite useful, like I say, for doing sharp texture. This is quite subtle, this one, because it's a cheap pencil and there's not much pigment in it. So the cheaper the pencil, the less pigment you have, because it's they don't want to spend the money on the pigment, basically, which is why you end up getting cheaper pencils with cheap quality, but they are useful, like I say, for doing scratchy qualities. And so we're building it up. I haven't really done much on the top, have I? I haven't even put the stalk in, but I will do. Is there any pink in here? A little bit, actually. I feel like there's a little bit of pink in here. A little bit of pink. Okay. I can also bizarrely see some lilac in here. So I want to try and find the lilac. Here it is. And I can see that up here. I'm going to be quite brave and put some lilac in up here, like that. And here, and then at the top, there's some obvious yellow here, nice and gentle. There's also some green in here. Quite obviously, there's going to be a bit of green, isn't there? I'm going to find myself a lightish green for this. So there's some green, which is where that part of the core sticks out. And there's some green down here. There's a bit there, around there, and a bit at the bottom. That. Is there any green? I like to use a pencil over the whole drawing once I've got it in my hand. There seems to be a bit of green over here, a bit of green in there. Now this is again a cheap pencil, so it's not yielding very much. And what happens is, as you can see, is that things start to build up, and you start. It sort of starts to emerge, if you like, from the ether. I might put some yellow back into here. And sometimes you might need a little break from something. So I'm going to come away from, I'm going to go in for this plate, this nice, this is a nice warm yellow. The plate is a warm yellow. So I'm now going to put in some warm yellow. Now, I did say originally that we go from light to dark, but that's not strictly true, as you can see, because I've done some shadow underneath, haven't I? So it's not always the case, but I tend to flick or back and forth between light and dark when I'm starting off because I want to put the shadows in. But some people don't. Some people don't do that. I do. So I'm just putting in the yellow of the plate. Generally better to use the side of the pencil so you get a nice softer quality. Now, because I've got blue as a shadow, it's going to turn it a bit green. That's okay. Doesn't matter. We'll go with that. And I'm sort of going with the direction of the plate. So I'm just going to sharpen my pencil. Quite nice to have a break sometimes from what you're doing on one part of the drawing and move to another. I'm just shifting the paper around so I can fan out the direction as it is on the plate, the rim of the plate. So I've got that yellow in now. I'm going to sort out this bit here. Well, where it's sort of it's nice shape in there. Okay, right, we're getting there slowly, slowly, slowly. I'm going to come back to these shadows now because I find these really rather beautiful. I'm going to go back in with this blue because I want them to be a really strong shadow. Come in with that. And this one has got a bit more lilac in than the other. You can always use your finger to smudge things a bit. Probably better to use a little bit of torn paper to smudge with. I'm a bit lazy sometimes. Right, so that edge down there is quite sharp. It's a bit better. And then down here, we've got this rather interesting sort of bottom of the apple, which is quite nice. And the reason I can get away with putting an outline is because there is a shadow next to it. The outlines don't go on the light side. Okay, right. So I can see some blue in the apple as well. So I'm going to carry on with this blue. I'm going to use this blue still. I'm going to put some here because there's this sort of like a darker part around here. And into here as well is a bit of, see, a bit of blue as well as brown. So it's sort of like a curve that comes up. See it over here as well. Hmm. So these sort of like directional mark making is useful because and there's a bit of a highlight here, which I'm going to take the liberty of using a bit of blue to surround that highlight. And there's two sort of like quite cliched, sort of like a window highlight here, like that. And then there's one down here as well. Oh, there's one here I've missed. That's quite useful because what that does is it forces you now to add more colour over that so it doesn't look so odd standing out like that. So I'm going to use my red now and go in around that. And the red sort of marries it all together. Use the other red as well. Which is there. And I'm also going to lift off a little bit of the colouring pencil with a rubber so I can define those lighter parts. And then I'm going to use a bit of my nice brown. Now I'm going to go for an orange for here. To sort of marry it all together. Okay. Now I need a little bit more of a darker colour, like a very dark red, which I'm not sure I actually have. So I might have to improvise here and use more of that blue as a way of marrying together those stronger parts with the rest. So that will make it a bit darker generally, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use this blue and pull it across more of the apple so these highlighted areas don't stand out so much. I mean, the outlines of them don't, that we put in with the dark blue. And it's what we call marrying something together. Okay, I'm going to go back in with some red. It's a long process, colouring pencil. Very long process. It's getting there. It's getting there. Slowly but surely, it's getting there. Now, a good thing about colouring pencils as well is that you can use white. I've got this off-white, which is quite nice to use. This is quite a good way of blending stuff together and pushing back colours that might be a bit strong. So I'm just using the white to push everything. It's like a way of blending everything together. And then I can go back over it again and lift certain colours out by adding them back in. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to use the reds. And smudge over them a bit so that they connect a bit more. That one's a bit too, that needs to go round a bit to match the direction of the apple. And then go back in with some orange. So it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There's no easy way, really, I don't think. Still not very happy with those highlights. So I might just rub over them a little bit more. A bit too lumpy. I'm going to give them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over them a bit with colour, and then I'm going to use my rubber. I'm using my finger to blend them a bit, and then I'm going to use a little tiny bit of rubber. Nearly, not quite, not quite. Let's sort that out in a minute, actually. I'm not quite sure about this. I'm getting there. That one's getting there. I'm looking at them. I think the answer is I probably made them too blocky. Too blocky. Okay, still going in the direction of the apple. I can use a rubber if I like to rub off, get some highlights in the direction of the rubber, in the direction of the apple. So I want to get some more lighting. Okay, that's getting there slowly but surely. Right, over to this side. So I'm going to use that off-white blending. Well, it's not really blending stick. You can get see-through blending or transparent blending colouring pencils. This one is actually an off-white one, but I use it because it gives it a nice, slightly milky quality, and it's quite good for doing things like inside of the apple. So I'm going to blend it together a bit. Everything I've done by just going over all of it. It's changing all the time. But I'm going to start it off with a bit of a green here. It's sort of like almost like feathery stripes going across. Right. That one. This is interesting now. This has really come out. It looks like a little person's leaping. And then we come down into these, which you can do green to start with. They're actually going to be brown, but so I can go back in with my brown now and get that. I love these, the shapes where the seeds go. Beautiful. Really beautiful. And then there's a bit of yellow here. And here. Quite so disconnected. A bit too lumpy. I'm going to give them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over them a bit with colour, and then I'm going to use my rubber. I'm using my finger to blend them a bit, and then I'm going to use a little tiny bit of rubber, um, or a sharpened rubber, to just get that out. Nearly, not quite, not quite. Let's sort that out in a minute, actually. I'm not quite sure about this. I'm getting there. That one's getting there. Have a look at it then. I think the answer is I probably made them too blocky. Too blocky. Okay, still going in the direction of the apple. I can use a rubber if I like to rub off, get some highlights in the direction of the rubber, in the direction of the apple. So I want to get some more lighting. Okay, that's getting there slowly but surely. Right, over to this side. So I'm going to use that off-white blending. Well, it's not really blending stick. You can get see-through blending or transparent blending colouring pencils. This one is actually an off-white one, but I use it because it gives it a nice, slightly milky quality, and it's quite good for doing things like inside of the apple. So I'm going to blend it together a bit, everything I've done, by just going over all of it. Then I'm going to, you can see this sort of like a pattern in the furriness of the apple, which is sort of more of that lilac. For me, it feels quite, it's a bit like lilac and green. It's changing all the time. But I'm going to start it off with a bit of a green here. It's sort of like almost like feathery stripes going across. Right. That one. This is interesting now. This has really come out. It looks like a little person leaping. And then we come down into these, which you can do green to start with. They're actually going to be brown, but so I can go back in with my brown now and get that. I love these, the shapes where the seeds go. Beautiful. And then there's a bit of yellow here. No, a bit of yellow in here. A bit of yellow in there. It's changing all the time, just changing, constantly changing. Getting there, getting there, getting there. Okay, so I might go in with a darker brown for that as well. It's quite dark in there, actually. That's darkening literally as I draw. And this is even these bits, so this has got sort of like a bit coming like that. And this is rather beautiful, this bit there. And then it's got some brownish colour. That. And then this is getting darker, or it seems darker. I don't know how the skin can get much darker, but it feels like it's got darker. I'm going to exaggerate it. You are quite entitled to exaggerate what you prefer. Okay. Now, because I've got the brown in my hand, the dark brown, I'm going to come back down into here and put in some of that brown around the bottom. and tuck it into here like that. There. We've got these sort of whiskery bits there. And then we've got the stalk, of course, which is coming up like that. Like that. And I can sort of see down here, I've got some brown down the edge of this. Okay, almost like a beard, sideburns down the side here. Like that. And then around here, sort of lost our highlight. I don't know where that highlight went, so I'm going to get it back. See if we can get that highlight. And then over here, and then I can use my blending pencil for this sort of like slightly fog quality here. Sort of a foggy quality bit there. And then that bit's just above that, isn't it? Foggy bit is sort of haloed by the dark. I think you can only be haloed by light, but I'm going for the description of haloed by dark brown. Okay, so we're getting there, getting there, slowly, 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 building up. I think that's looking quite nice so far. It's getting there. Still not ready yet, but put some more red in. I'm going to put a bit more orange in. And a bit more yellow. Quite an endless process, really, isn't it? Get some oomph back in it. Get the apple peel oomph back in. Quite nice, quite nice, quite happy with that. Now I'm going to come back to the yellowing brown, excuse me, browning saga over here. I'm going to use the rubber to lift off some of these lighter areas. Haven't been affected by the browning and yellowing process. Right, so I'm just going to have a little break from it and have a think about what I'm going to do next. Very important to take breaks, and actually, because we're working flat, which you shouldn't really be, you should be working at an angle. I'm going to lift it up and have a look for myself how it's looking. And then, so having a look at it, I realised that this line here comes down lower, that, and the apple needs to be much brighter plate. And then here I'm going to go more zingy, zingy, zingy on the orange, using the orange rather, and make the apple more zingy. It needs a lot more oomph, and the orange is going to do that for me. Already that's much better. And then I can go in with a bit more red. So we want to make it nice and zingy, zingy. That's better. And then I need to go back into the plate. The plate needs to be stronger. To sharpen my pencil a bit. You can use electric sharpeners, but you have to buy a really good one. I used to be an animator, and we had to sharpen our pencils all the time. And we used the sharpener box things that clip onto the side of the table, and then you put your pencil in and you wind a handle. And those were great. They're quite expensive. They're made by a German company, can't remember which one, and they're fantastic. Massive generalization here, but I think German drawing products are fantastic. The sharpeners are great, the pencils are great. I don't think the French would like me saying that, but it is the truth. For pigment, the French. For drawing pencils, drawing equipment, the Germans. Well, and the close second is the Japanese. Now the plate's built up, I feel a little bit happier about coming back to the apple. You can just sort of shift from background to foreground, from background to foreground. It sort of gives you a little holiday from doing too much detail when maybe it's not quite ready for detail. Just to shift around a bit, it's looking quite nice. Right, coming back to here. Now it's browning even more. I'm going to show you because you've got the picture, but look at it now, look. So I can add some more browns in now, as well as yellows. So I'm going to go back in. So you have to be adaptable. Okay, there's my nice brown. I'm going to go for a bit of brown in there. So what I'm doing is slightly different to your picture. Now that green little leaping man at the top has turned quite brown. That's what I love about, oh, and these little patterns, the feathery patterns, have gone quite brown as well. Okay, that's looking a lot better. Okay. I love the way it changes and makes it so much more interesting to draw. Yeah, looking much more interesting. Okay, it's getting there. It's getting there, slowly but surely. I mean, I could go on forever, really, but obviously life's too short. But I'm going to sort of put in this now. It comes down there. Right, so we've got some sort of like got that shadow. Now the shadow on my plate seems to have got a lot bluer and darker. So I'm going to put that in. And it seems to be coming down there. The shadows will change during the day, obviously. If you're only working in a one consistent light, artificial light, then you can have more control over it. But I've got a mixture of the two, so mine's changing quite a bit as the outside gets lighter. I started this drawing quite early in the morning, but oh, this has got a lot stronger here. This one, so it's got bigger. I'm going to put some lilac back into that because I think it really needs it. Sometimes you get a bit streaky, a bit streak going on there. Right, so what I would do now is I would get my, oh, I'm going to use some, like a grey here. So I'm going to get some of these highlights in the plate. So they're sort of, just get some of that light going on. Quite an interesting pattern. Oh, I can see a bit more of a shadow of the actual sort of heart shape of the apple here. Sort of this shape here is emerging. That's nice. Um, can go a bit darker actually. This. And this can go a lot darker. Don't know what I was thinking. That could be even darker there. Wow, that's got so much darker. Now, your shadows might not change this much, but mine certainly have. Now, oddly, this, well, not oddly, but this shadow is actually quite shaped. This one, more so than the other. And I've got the occlusion, which is where the object touches the surface of what it's on, you do get an occlusion shadow. So you are able to put in a stronger shadow where it makes contact there. Mm. Some sort of ridgy pattern going on here. I'm not bothering too much with these. I'm not really that massively interested in them. But there is a sort of flourish. Just add that in a bit there. What else can I put in? I can see that. This has got feels it might be a bit darker. So it feels to me like at this point, I would probably start to think, I might just call it a day soon because Quite enjoying it not being too pinned down. Quite enjoying that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pencil, my actual graphite pencil, which you might be surprised by because you'd think, why would I want to do that? So I'm using a 2B, and I'm just going to go in and sharpen some of these things up because sometimes it's you sort of lose a bit of the sharpness. I like that actually. I'm quite pleased with that. Sort of got a nice feel to it. I like that very much. I think I'm going to leave it as it is. I like it as it is. There you go. Colouring pencil at two halves of an apple.